Welcome to the Heart and Science of Creative Leadership podcast. I am Bill Coletti, joined by my amazing co-host, Aarti Shah. Aarti, how are you today?
I am good.
That's awesome. We've got a fabulous conversation that we're getting ready to have with Josh Reynolds. And Josh is a friend of both of ours. He and I worked together back in the day at H&K. And I know from your vantage point, Aarti, you had known him in a number of different iterations in his career.
Yes, I remember sitting outside with Josh when he was running global tech for H&K, and they had just won this little social network called LinkedIn that they were trying to build some traction for, and that was a big deal. And he told that to me in confidence at the time. No, it's no longer confidential information.
And now Josh has gone on to better things. He started his own firm, Rob Roy Consulting. And in this conversation, we hit on two main themes. We talked about a lot of things, but two main things that really stuck out to me is this notion of working with family and how do you instill culture with a handful of people that are directly related to you versus those that are not. And then the second point around this notion of a performance agency versus a lifestyle agency. And both of those points pulled through, and Josh had a lot of interesting perspective on both of those.
Yeah, and I think the working with family members, I think that's a really common, this natural talent pool, right, for founders to pull from. But, just because you love somebody does not necessarily mean that you're going to be good at coming up with a consensus together, right? And also, how does it impact, employees as you start to grow? And then, of course, the performance versus lifestyle agency. I think that's going to be an ongoing theme in a lot of our conversations.
Yeah, because I think it's just interesting juxtaposition. And so just as a lead in, we'll have a great conversation. Josh is super healthy with the way he sort of approaches family and approaches those distinctions. His wife is the CFO. And just as a quick anecdote is that I won't disclose the agency and we probably will not interview them, but it's a medium-sized marketing firm in the Southeast. Husband and wife, the four of them came together. Wife B is no longer part of the equation. Husband B now has a new partner. And so a really complicated mess. So you add lots of dynamics around relationships. And so hearing the way Josh talks about family and hearing the way Josh talks about making decisions is certainly a breath of fresh air. So with that, let's get into our conversation with our friend Josh Reynolds.
Josh Reynolds, a name that might be familiar to many of you listening if you've been in the industry long enough. Josh made quite the name for himself at WPP over the years, leading global tech for H&K, which no longer exists.
Technology or H&K?
And it begins.
Maybe.
All right.
Yes. Well, I'm gonna throw in one more because this is actually one of the things that I remember most about Josh as being CEO of Blanc & Otis as he tried so hard to revive that beleaguered brand. Today, Josh runs his own consulting firm called Rob Roy. Welcome to the show, Josh.
Thank you. It is good to be here. And Bill, it's great to be back together again, man. It's been a minute.
Yeah, man. I'm looking forward to this and watching you. And we got to work together. We did some San Francisco. We also did some other stuff. And you said so many smart things that I have just liberally stolen when I was in the consulting business. Particularly one that I really love that I wanted to single out, and maybe we'll start here to get you to react to, is it was in a data breach or something that kind of tech crisis. Yeah. Be a part of the herd because you're at a bank and there's a data breach. You're not the only company that's had that. So be in the herd and find comfort in others. And the airline industry does that a lot. They're not immune to tragedy. And so they do a good job of kind of being in the herd. So that was one that you left with me. And does that still feel true, that being in the herd is a good strategy?
To a large degree, yes. And the reason I think it's a strategy is because you want to put yourself in the shoes of your target audience. You want to get as close as you can to them. And at the time, I know what you're talking about. There was a particular retailer that had a holiday season breach, which is much publicized. And the notion is they weren't in it alone. it wasn't like that particular retailer was the only one who had been targeted. Several had. And rather than get defensive about, oh my goodness, how could this happen to us? It was, how can we learn from this for the good of the herd, for the good of the group? And the more you can put yourself on the side of your audience and realize, hey, let's approach this together. There's not only safety in numbers for other folks who are dealing with similar issues, but there's also just a truth to the fact that no one wants bad things to happen. We all would like these things to get better. Let's just be on the same side.
I mean, that be a part of the herd, that's great to hear, because that's something I never hear agencies willing to say. Everyone is the only integrated shop. They are first and best in class, capabilities. Where in reality, right, many of them are just part of a herd. Many of their so anyway, it's just juxtaposing that kind of thinking in a technology scenario where there's obviously benefit to that, to where, to kind of more broadly, if you're in the professional services business, that you never want to say you're part of the herd.
Which is so funny because, and we're using the word herd here loosely, I might say community, but yeah, it's the same idea. Larger group, something bigger than yourself. So just two things to say on that. Just earlier today, I was working with a client who has a grand vision for transforming healthcare. People have been talking about transforming healthcare for the better part of 20 years. It has been the theme at all the shows for 20 years. No one believes that any one company can transform healthcare. What's different about this particular client's approach? Their lead message is, we're not doing it alone. In fact, we're not doing it. We're going to help healthcare heal itself from the inside out. It is a community. It is a network. And how do you pull that together? So it applies to technology companies and to anyone who's running their own small but mighty firm or mid-size but mighty firm. Knowing what you do and knowing where that fits in with where others do, I think it's the way to go. I would say on easily 60% of all of our client engagements, we know we're not the only outside agency in the shop. And that is a strength. If I can come in with a value proposition that says, here's what we do, by the way, here's what we don't do, or here's what we don't do as well as somebody else. I think modern value propositions are incomplete until you tell someone, here's where we do our A+ work, but here's where we do like just good enough work. And here's where we would be better partnering with someone else. So there's things we don't do that by saying that, like, you earn trust and you play as a partner of a larger community. Bill, come on, man, let's just be honest. Like the role of the WPP mega agency, there will always be a role for giant agencies to play, but more and more, there's a role for a loose coalition of like-minded entrepreneurs who are just honest with each other and freaking real with each other to say, let's share. There's plenty out there.
Yeah, so let's talk.
Well, when there are plenty, when there is plenty,
when there is plenty, that's true. Well, so let's back to the herd metaphor. But talking about ownership. And so, yeah, I agree that partnerships are great, and aligning comparable assets where there's no equity and whatnot, and their temporary relationships are beneficial. But let's get kind of real about that. There's plenty of ego among owners that don't let that go down, and they don't want to share. And if you get invited to like 5 square feet of the elevator, and that's about all you get invited to. And so talk about ego in the herd, and the herd now being a herd of owners, people that are building and growing their firms and figuring out what's right. How does the ego fit in that when you work with other allies and partners? You said like-minded.
Yeah.
Not having a big ego is probably the first threshold of like-mindedness.
So I'm going to be real with y'all. I think the biggest ego I've got to manage is mine, honestly.
We can do that. Meaning we can do that work?
You're trying to manage my ego for me now? I'll take all the help I can get. No, so honestly, look, let's get specific about ego for a second. Ego comes down to fear and desire. I'm afraid I'm going to lose something out. I'm afraid I'm not growing fast enough. I'm afraid I'm going to get typecast as just good at one thing. And it's that fear that interferes with the trust and the trusted relationships. Or the I feel under pressure to grow my number. So even though I don't think I'm as good at it as someone else is, I'm going to try to go secure that revenue. But that's me playing a short-term game. So the first ego I got to manage, Bill, is mine. I got to be clear. on what am I afraid of? What is my near-term goal? My long-term goal is to provide so much value that clients keep coming back to me. And we'll get back to that in a minute, Aarti. We talked about the fact that the vast majority of our clients are project-based, not retainer. But in terms of the egos, I got to manage mine first. And then second, it's so funny you bring this up, Bill. Just last week, I was asked to do sales training for a global technology company I can't name, but we'd finished working on a new narrative for this company. And it was a narrative that worked so well that the sales, product, and marketing teams, they're aligned around it. They're on the same page. Like from the CEO down to the mid-level salespeople, they are on it, man. Like they want it. And the next question was, well, Josh, you tell the story. You sound pretty persuaded and convincing when you deliver it. Can you help our sales team do it? Absolutely. Love to train the sales team. Well, they have a sales training agency in the mix. And there ensued 90 minutes of meetings around, wait, so who's going to do what and who's owning what and how's it going to go? Now there's...
Yeah, aren't you the PR guy? Why is the PR guy teaching training or teaching sales?
Exactly. And the answer is, well, okay, first of all, I'm not the sales training guy. I'm also not the PR guy. I'm the storyteller. And so my job is to help people tell the right story. Secondly, tell me, sales training agency, what is precious to you in this? What are you defending really? So I don't just manage the ego, I manage the fear. Like, what are you protecting? What is it that's sacred to you? And it turns out they were protecting something that made a lot of sense to protect. We've spent 2 years teaching the sales team a certain language around the sales process. We don't want to have to like break that and learn a new model. Fine, I'll use your language. I won't use my model. I'll use your model, but we're still going to teach them the new story. So long answer to a short question, Bill, managing egos, it starts by checking out what I'm afraid of and making sure I'm focused on the right long-term goal. And then I'm asking the other folks, what are you protecting? What's precious to you? And you want to think near-term, long-term, up to you. But like you say, Bill, not everyone plays that game. So you got to be selective about who you partner with.
So one of the things, Josh, you called yourself a storyteller. And one of the things that I've borrowed from you is that you don't just call yourself a storyteller. You call yourself that you're in the business of persuasion, right? And that's right. And I've actually borrowed that from you, and I've reminded people in our business like what's at the core of what we do, and that is persuasion. And so you've built Rob Roy around that's your core offering, and that's why, Bill, to your point, the quote PR guy is coming in to talk to the sales team, because you're not the PR guy, to your point. You're the persuasion guy.
Yeah, I'd say we haven't done more than 10, 15% of our work focused on media or media relations. There are some amazing media relations firms out there that I would send people to and partner to. I think PR stands for persuasion and rhetoric. That's what it really stands for. Because people that have been convincing super smart, often opinionated journalists to write a story and include a particular message or a particular thread, that's one of the toughest things you can do. I was trained as a criminal prosecutor, and I think being in media relations is harder because I don't have orderly references and data points in a system. I just got what my clients told me, and I got what the reporter's going to write. This is a body of people in the creative services realm who work in persuasion and rhetoric every day, and we forget that there is both a science and an art to it, or if you will, both a heart and a mind to it. There's a rational and an emotional part to this. It is about persuasion. And when we founded the firm, we founded it on one core belief. The most persuasive thing you can do is to find the truest thing to say, both intellectually and emotionally. And it's the story that creates the emotional aspect of that.
So I love that. And that just sings to me. And I really appreciate that. I want to talk about the market realities of that. I get that's your truth, but I want headlines. I want, butts in seats, or I want whatever I want as the owner, as the client. As the client, I want an outcome. And this truth stuff is not really what I'm ready to talk about. How does that help me get on CNBC to hawk my wares? Yeah,
so it turns out that it actually does drive revenue, both near and long term. In the realm of B2B tech, my firm and I have done research for the past several years, and it's all free. And you don't even have to give us an email to look at it. It's on the website. easily downloadable, with
Mm-hmm.
with no gated stuff. And the tech world has been facing a crisis of trust for a while. The vast majority of B2B tech buyers assume that the salesperson or the rep they're talking to is not telling them the entire truth. Vast majority just assume that, which means the burden is on you to earn their trust. And one of the fastest ways to earn their trust is to tell them what your product doesn't do and to tell them how to protect themselves from all the hype that's out there. Gen AI is transformative, and it's about to lead to this amazing masquerade and cascade of colossal mistakes because people are going in way too quick, buying into all the hype, and then there's some amazing mistakes already being made. A vendor who wants to earn trust tells the truth. The vendor that earns trust gets more leads. And so I'm not walking in with a philosophical version of the truth. I'm talking about say what's really the most important thing to say. Right. So in the case of Gen AI, the truest thing to say is if you're an executive, you are terrified that you've missed the boat. You are afraid of missing out and you're about to rush forward, but there's no advantage to being the first lemming over the cliff. You're looking for the fast path to getting it right. So let's not let your fear lead to stupid decisions. Let's just stop for a second and double check, how should I approach this correct? That's my example, Bill, of finding the truest thing to say. I'm not talking about something that is philosophical. I'm talking about just being real, because people can tell when you're being real. And if you're not going to earn their trust.
And I mean, that authenticity is, I mean, that's what I advise clients myself. That's what I advise executives as I coach them. But going back to Bill's point about the market reality, right? I mean, one of the things I think that you've said, Josh, is with the truth on your side, there's no such thing as an unwinnable fight, right? But what if your product, hypothetically speaking, is contributing to a mental health epidemic amongst teenagers and young people? As one example, what if the truth is truly harmful? Because I know a lot of people out there that are listening, they get clients coming in the door, they get prospects coming in the door every day whose truth may not be aligned with the perception that they're being hired to promote.
I hear that. So here's what I can tell you. Been doing this for a little bit more than 7 years now. Vast majority of the clients are project-based, which means they don't have to come back to us, and we have about an 80 to 85% return rate. We have resigned to clients because we discovered during the discovery phase of our narrative development, there's some things that either their solution or their company were doing that didn't really reflect what they were saying, what wasn't true, and looked borderline harmful. In one case, we brought that up to the client and they said, you're right, we should change our approach. And they made material changes to how they went to market and what they were doing. And the other client said, yes, thank you for that feedback. We're going to proceed with our current plan. And in the first case, we just paused working with the client until they got their act together and changed how they were working. And in the second case, we've never worked with them again. When I say when the truth is on your side, there's no such thing as a winnable fight. What I don't mean is you're going to always win the brief and do the PR campaign and get the results. What I mean to say is wait long enough and you will see the benefit of that honesty come back to you. And I also will say this, there is a hunger out there from people that we've seen for feeling authentic and honest in their work. When we can give someone a persuasive narrative that is true and fact-based, the wave of relief we've seen on some people's faces, like, wait, I don't have to lie to win? No, you don't. You don't. There is this, you can see the shoulders drop about an inch. There's this emotional release of, I don't have to be a jerk in order to survive. And no, not every single person on the planet buys into it, but there's enough people who do to make for a really healthy market out there, that I can tell you.
Yeah. So I get it. And in what I'm doing is talking to owners of firms, and a 4-figure deal is a big deal. A 5-figure deal is a big deal. A 6-figure deal is a big deal. So, And also, even on the most disciplined of us, we spend that money before we cash the check. All right. Because we need to buy a new laptop, or we need to update our subscription
100%.
to the whatever whizzy whatchet that's out there.
Yeah.
So help us think through that conflict of values with the reality, because you smiled when I said, you've spent that check before you ever cashed the check. How do you balance that? And that intellectual and really ideological totem pole that you're up on the top of, which is wonderful, but $50,000 would buy a bunch of laptops, or whatever you need to buy this week.
So my first answer to that question is my wife is our CFO, and she is a very honest, direct human being who will tell me, okay, we can turn this business away. And if you do, here's what's not going to happen. It's good to have more than one person making that decision. Second thing is, when we have that decision, we've made it as a group. The client I referred to that we resigned, we had a team meeting, and we have 5 full-time employees, and we pulled them all together. And it wasn't on me to make that decision alone. I said, look, we've all been working on this account. Here are the concerns we have. If we say goodbye to this business, here's how much we're going to have to go out and get to replace it. If we don't, here's how much we're going to have to cut pay. What do y'all want to do? And when you run a team this small with people that you've known for years, I'm not related to every team member. I just want to say this. It's not just a family band, but they are people I've known for a long time, and I count as friends. We made that decision and took that risk together. So, Bill, first of all, I don't want to try to paint a picture of I'm on some high horse and everything's super easy, and I'm living down here in the reality in the same blood, sweat, and tears everyone else is.
Sure.
But our team made that decision together, transparently. We'll take that risk. And when we did that, we decided, no, we would rather make a little less money in the near term while we look for someone else who shares the same value. And I want to say again to the owners out there, the people listening in, you will be shocked at how many people want to do the right thing and how many people are looking for a solution where they win by telling the truth and find an honest, persuasive story. There's more appetite for it out than you might think.
Absolutely.
I mean, how do you find, so how do you make sure that everybody feels safe in saying something like, wow, like a quarter of a pay, like quarter of my pay, like I can't afford to do that. But if the CEO is coming at this with a sort of a moral angle of like, this is wrong for us to take this business, and you're not thinking about that, you're thinking about the fact that your mortgage, you may not make the numbers work if your pay went down by 25%. But you may not feel safe countering a moral argument with a crass financial one in this situation. So how do you create an environment where somebody would feel safe saying, you know what, I don't agree with this client either, but I can't afford to cut my pay by 25%.
Yeah, so 2 things. The part that makes me uncomfortable in all this, and I'm really glad you brought this up, I don't want to sound like I'm trying to impose a morality. It comes down to, what kind of work do you want to do? What kind of work do you feel good about doing? It's just a choice. So whether you consider it a moral dilemma, an ethical dilemma, or just, damn it, I don't want to lie for a living, however you want to cast it, it's a choice. I didn't create this work environment. I surrounded myself with people that have been telling me, Josh, you're dead wrong, for years. So in my case, I've got, a former creative director for Intel, works for us, Chris Lane. He was a groomsman at my wedding. He's been telling me I'm full of shit for years. Like, he has no compunction whatsoever about going, dude, what are you doing? That's insane. The person who's our head of operations, I've known her for 25 years. We just have a lot of trust in this small but mighty group that we have. And so I can count on them to be real with me. Also, I will share, I have an overactive sense of obligation to these folks because I've known them for so long. I'm the one who's worried about giving up the revenue, because I would feel horrible if I had to cut anybody's pay, because I literally love everyone I work with and have since before this company started. So I'm the one who's up sweating spinal fluid at night going, was that the right call? All I can say, I can't tell you what's right for other people. All I can tell you is we've been running this way for 7.5 years. We survived the pandemic following this principle. There have been times when I've had to cut my pay, for sure, and I've been the first one to do it. So I can't say that, oh, money always follows the karma and it's beautiful and rainbows. And like it's not like that. But I'm very comfortable with the decisions and the risks that we've taken. And I'm especially comfortable with it because I've included my team in those decisions. We picked our path.
So what's the future look like? You guys want to grow? What's the future look like?
I don't know, Bill. I have no idea what the future looks like. I hope it is.
Well, you're going to run out of groomsmen and people you've known for 25 years eventually.
Maybe.
I don't know how big your wedding was, but maybe not.
Well, yeah, no, it was a small private affair, but I'm under no pressure to grow. Fortunately, when we founded the company, we got all of our funding came from our first major global project, which was helping Nissan rebrand its mobile intelligence brand positioning. And that was the first project, and it funded the firm for the first year, which was amazing. The future is more of the kind of work that we're doing. The future is teaching more people outside of our agency to do it. I actually don't care if my agency grows. I care a little bit more about, do more and more people benefit from the kinds of approaches we put together. So about a third of our work now, Bill, is actually training and educating and teaching other people like all the tricks that we've got put together and teaching all the frameworks that we have. A third of our work is finding the narrative, and the remaining third is actually creating the content and the bespoke materials around the narrative. But the future is more and more sharing what we have and teaching and coaching others. And it would be kind of cool if everyone felt really comfortable and confident and passionate speaking their truth and asking smart questions and not worrying about it so much as people do a lot of the times. Like, I would love to see that happen. And so I don't care if my team gets bigger. I just kind of want this idea to catch on.
Well, so if you mentioned, so a third of your business is trainings, which are like frameworks and methodologies. Who owns those?
I do.
Because that's, you do. And solely you, right? So then if you don't necessarily need to grow the number of people you have, if you can develop enough value for those, what these frameworks, these methodologies, you could just sell those. And I mean, how is the agency structured? In that, sounds like you are the sole owner.
We are, yeah. We are an S corporation. I am the sole owner. And
hey, Josh, is this your first adventure in entrepreneurism?
Yes.
Rob Roy. Okay, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, not at all. It is my first venture, but I had the luxury of. So after I left WPP, I spent 2 years as the chief marketing officer for a data science company, and in my employment contract, they gave me room to consult on the side, and that was because there were some holdover clients from B&O and H&K that I wanted, sometime to still advise to. So I had the freedom to continue to consult on the side. I had 2 years of that, and then all of a sudden, the side gig had so much potential. I wanted to jump in and do it myself, and so with the blessing of that data science company, it actually became a client for a time. I opened up Rob Roy. As an S corporation, I am the sole owner. The people on the team know that we're not really trying to sell. Like, we're not following that traditional path of, let's get to 50% comp to fee. Let's be an attractive target. We're in that range where we're, depending on how good or bad the year is, anywhere from 1.5 to 2.5 in revenue, million in revenue in any given year. So we're small, but we're not. It's not, so what our future is not, Bill, it's not hit a number, get bought, retire. That's not the future. The future is keep working with people we love. We have 5 full-time employees. We also have half a dozen regular freelancers we go with. We love working with.
And how old are you, Josh? How old are you?
I'm 50.
Oh, putting him on the spot.
That's all right. Well, at least not a job interview. That's okay. I'm 54.
Yeah.
54. I'm 54.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the future for us is continuing to grow the service. If that means that we want to hire someone else full-time, we've got folks that would love that full-time work. But what I don't want to do is to force any clients into a retainer relationship that doesn't make sense just so I can justify the hire. I want the clients to dictate the shape of the work. And we've got 5 or 6 clients that are very happy with every year they come back for another project, right? And we got one that's come back 7 years in a row. There's no retainer, nothing that says they have to. But I kind of like the fact, and Aarti, we talked about this as well. I know that you work for, there's a pride that comes from they value the work so much that they came back on their own.
Right.
So I like that. But I don't think, Bill, we're not trying to hit a certain number or force a target. We just want to see how good the work gets and how big that takes us.
So I want to go back to let's be real about what it's like to work with people who you literally love, right? As someone, I am in the process of working with my siblings to plan a family reunion this summer, and I love all of them, but my gosh, simple decisions have become quite complicated. My husband and I we'll talk about what we want to have for dinner one night and where to order takeout from, and that gets complicated, right? So because you love someone does not necessarily mean that decision making is going to be easy. In fact, in some ways, I think it can be more complicated. And I'm thinking about, again, I'm going to go back to pay here for a second. So if we're talking about year-end bonuses, right? Josh, you're the sole owner, that's great. How do you, when your wife is CFO, whoever does not share the Reynolds, last name, literally or figuratively, they are going to look at this and say, well, maybe the wife didn't, what does it matter to her? Because she essentially gets whatever profits you see, right? So it does create some tension. I would think you may, your best buddy who was a groomsman in your wedding may love you to death, but it's going to start to wonder at some point, is he getting his fair share for his contributions? How do you manage that? And because I've worked in family-owned businesses and I've seen this resentment sort of start to percolate to the point where it can get toxic if you don't nip it in the bud. And because of the friendship, it gets very difficult to talk about as well.
Chris, if you're listening to this and you're feeling weird, let's get beers and talk about it. Just want to call that one out.
This is for promotional purposes only.
Thank you very much. Aarti, I can see why you'd ask the question, and I can see how that would be a concern for most people. It's actually the harder conversation, just being really real, the harder conversation is between me and my wife, the CFO, because I am the one who cuts my pay first. I'm that guy. I think if Chris were here, we just had a chat about this. I think if he were here, what he would say is what he appreciates the most is the flexibility he gets with the job. I'm not going to share his personal circumstances, but I will share that it requires a fair amount of flexibility in his schedule. There are points of time during the day where he needs to be taking care of a family member or doing something else. He gets it. I have no doubt that the work is getting done and getting done well. And we negotiated both a salary and we also negotiated a bonus range. We are transparent with our billings, and every month and every quarter, we share, here's the pipeline, here's where it is. If this revenue goes above this number, we're funding a bonus pool. If the revenue drops to this level, we're not funding a bonus pool, but your pay is safe. If the revenue goes to this level, I'm going to have to cut my pay until it comes back up. And if it goes below this level, we may have to cut your pay. We are transparent about that. What I can't control is how does he feel about working at a business where, 2 of the other 5 people are related to me. What I can do is to make sure we treat him as fairly and transparently as possible. The harder conversation is when you're trying to give direction to a CFO who is also your wife. And I don't know anyone else out there, but I don't think many of us like to tell our significant others exactly, like, here's what you're going to do now. That's not how the conversation goes. It's got to be a lot more give and take, a lot more respectful. But I think everyone on the team knows exactly where the numbers are. They know what it takes to fund the bonus pool. And I'll also share that even in the years where we didn't make our numbers, we found monies because it's the holidays and no one should go through the holidays without some form of thank you. So I don't know if that answered your question. That's just the truest thing I could say.
Yeah, you also reinforced, that flexibility component, right? We are living now in a world where we're seeing the big holding companies get very giddy about bringing people back to the office, going back to the old world that we all swore was going to be dead in 2020. And agencies like yourself are seeing a real competitive advantage in being able to continue to offer
the
that
asset
flexibility.
mix. You can be more creative with the mix of assets. Assets meaning comp, time, computer, all that's an asset. You can mix it up in a really creative, interesting way with your team.
Absolutely. And we also do make it a requirement to get together regularly once in a while. So, my creative director works out here in California. He works in the East Bay. I work here in Silicon Valley. Once a month, come into work. And we've got our research associate works out in Denver. Once a month. Let's get out here and get in person. Perhaps the most important thing we do is we get drinks together after work. Like we'll do a brainstorm session together, work the whiteboard together, the old-fashioned whiteboard with markers and erasers and all that, and just spend time together physically. Thank goodness our head of operations and I are here at the same office together. She's the most organized, structured, reliable person I've ever met. And I'm glad that she's here in person because that rubs off on me. But for everyone else, Bill, you're right. You should have the flexibility to be where you need to be, work asynchronously, and then find some way to keep the ties together, doing something once in a while. But I'm not going to tell my employees when they're most productive. They've got lives, right? And I have to just trust that if the work product is getting done the right way, it's going to be okay.
I think a lot of people are seeing and experiencing that. Josh, answer this question in two parts. Sort of the pre-entrepreneur Josh and Josh of today. How do you define success? How did you define success and how do you define success?
I don't know why, but my heart leapt in my throat when you asked me that question, Bill. That's got some heat.
It's a hard question. It's a great question, but it's a hard question.
I would say that pre-entrepreneurial Josh had a very unhealthy relationship with success. I would define it as avoiding failure. Just terrified to let people down. I think it had a lot more to do then with how many people am I managing? And how big is my book of business?
Bigger is better.
Bigger is better.
Meaning bigger is better.
Bigger is better.
Yeah, okay.
Not by accident. I was bigger too. I'd say pre-entrepreneurial Josh was about 70 pounds heavier. After, I'm much more focused on, yes, you need money. You need to be able to cover your costs. I got 3 kids. The youngest is about to start college. There's some very real things associated with that. But once you have the fundamentals covered, after that, it really is about, am I having the kind of impact I want to have? And am I happy with what I'm doing? Look, so you asked my age, I'm 54. And I think there comes a point in time in many people's lives where the time becomes more valuable than the money. Because I can always...
It's around 55 in my experience.
Yep. No, because I can always find more money, right? So pre-entrepreneurial Josh, it was about size of the team, the book of the business, all the things that
paycheck. I mean, if we're honest,
sure, absolutely. Yeah. And afterwards, no, I want to be able to pay the people that support me. I want to be able to support my family. I want to be proud of what I'm doing. I want to believe in what I'm doing. I do still really worry about, am I having enough of an impact? Like we've taught these models and engaged in this work with literally hundreds of clients that are now using these models. And I'm still kicking myself like, is that enough? Is that enough? I can't tell you where that comes from, but that's the one holdover from pre-entrepreneurial Josh. But afterwards, it's not about the big, it's about the meaning. It really is about the meaning.
I'm going to question this 55, this shift that happens at 55. I have not hit that yet, but I wonder if there's a generational component, right? We are looking at a new generation. And again, I feel lucky that I think I just squeaked past that I'm not part of this group. But I mean, I read the economic sort of reality that they're facing, which includes a staggering amount of student debt, house prices, right, that are, starter homes were at 7 figures easily. Today, now we're at interest rates at 9%. I don't know that they are going to be able to hit a switch at 55 and say, you know what, my time is now more valuable than my money. And I know enough people that are on, I'm on the cusp that I said, I think I squeaked by, without any student debt and some of the things that all of this new generation is facing. But I know enough people that are in that reality. that I just think that the days of, getting your house for $400,000 and having it paid off by the time you're 55 are not the reality anymore. So I just don't know if today's entrepreneur, if you're starting an agency today, you're 32, you may not have the same luxury to say, you know what, I'm going to do this for 10 years, 15 years, and then I'm going to switch gears. I mean, when you're looking at $250,000 per child per college.
No, so I will say two things. I agree with you that it's not limited to the, let's be honest, Bill, middle-aged white guy that's like, what's it all about? Like, not everyone has to have that David Burns once in a lifetime moment. But what I have observed is the younger generation is extraordinarily concerned with purpose, personal purpose, very purpose-driven, very purpose-motivated. And so it may, if I could reframe it, I would say doing something I believe in and doing something I believe will help the world around me does appear to be a generational difference. I also will openly call bullshit on the myth that if you just put in your time for some large company, or if you put in your time at a VC-backed startup and earn equity, that if you sacrifice your health and happiness and family time now, that there's a payoff later. I don't think that's real. I think that's an unhelpful myth that's been promulgated. And I wouldn't wait until you're in your fifth decade to start doing what you believe in and using your time wisely.
Yeah.
And one last thing I'll say is, yes, they are purpose driven if you're looking more at millennials. But then if you go down to Gen Z, they are cynical as I don't know what kind of, Bill, we never discussed what kind of language we consider appropriate on this podcast. But they came of age as COVID happened. They don't have the same veil of optimism that those of us that came of age during the boom times about the reality of corporate life and the reality of how quickly your job is going to be shed the moment that the quarterly profits monster needs to be fed, right? And I mean, I follow a lot of these Gen Zers on TikTok, and their attitudes about work are that they no longer, they're not actually seeking purpose from work. And I just think this is interesting for the context of this conversation as entrepreneurs today are thinking about hiring tomorrow's workforce. Maybe things like what you're saying, Josh, about providing flexibility and saying, look, I know that you have a life outside of this job, and I want to make sure that you have the space to show up for that versus you're 25, you should be eating dinners in the office 4 nights a week.
Yeah,
right?
I will echo this, and Bill, I'm curious to get your take on it as well. But so our research associate is 23. He is currently working from various Airbnbs in Italy as he eats his way through Italy. And he has shown up on time to every Zoom call, well-dressed with solid Wi-Fi. And when our clients, who tend to be older, slightly more conservative professionals, hey, where are you islanding from, man? Genoa? Oh my gosh, have you had the salami? You got to get the back out. There's this immediate sense of, I wish I could be doing that. But this is a young person who is delivering work, showing up from Italy, and has openly said, I don't want work to be my defining factor. So the flexibility is a big piece of it. But the other piece of it is this. We know that Jesse is not going to retire at Rob Roy Consulting. We know that. We openly talk about that. When he does leave, we want him to be more persuasive, more confident, and have a certain set of skills.
Absolutely.
So we openly, overtly negotiate the apprenticeship. For that cynical group, Aarti, that you're talking about, we're not here, come here and make the world a more honest place. That's not the pitch. It's, we believe being honest drive sales, stock price, employee retention, and every other business measure you care about. We can show you a connection. Are you going to work here for as long as it works for you. And when you leave, you are going to be a Jedi in persuasion, which will help you in anything else you do. And that is the conversation we have with this guy that's.
But when Jesse leaves, will the client leave with him, or this is why, a lot of agency owners will say they need their firm to be a place where people can grow, because when the talent churns, the clients follow shortly after.
For whatever reason, I'm not worried about that in this case. And if there's a client that does follow Jesse, God bless him. I'll go find a new one.
Yeah. So my take on that is, I get So I talked to 3 different types of owners. I talked to the entrepreneurial curious, sort of the emerging and the established.
Okay.
Those are the 3 owner basic big buckets that I'm talking to. Those entrepreneurial curious, depending upon where they are, 30s maybe. I mean, shit, some of them are in their 50s, entrepreneurially curious. But that younger cadre, I say, go find a mid-sized firm, maybe a little bit bigger than Rob Roy, but go find a mid-sized firm, get as close as you can to the principal, learn the business. Don't learn the BS, because if you stay too long at these big companies, you'll learn the BS, but learn the business, learn the billing, learn how do you manage time off, learn and understand what a 401k is and a simple IRA, learn that stuff, then go start your own firm. Then go take that step. And so what I am seeing in that group of sort of 55 to 75-year-old owners, they said too, just like you, they don't want to sell. That's not their future. That's not what they're going to do. They're just going to do it. But they're over it. And they would like to figure out, how do I extract some value out of this? And I think what the opportunity is for that new person starting in the firm that may have been around for 2 or 3 years is to structure a really creative buyout so that the principals, you and I, get paid over the long haul with amazing new energy that we actually trained really well. And sort of understands and knows our business. But that's not the deal on day one. We're not going in that way, because I think that there are owners of firms 55 to 75 that are like, okay, I'm too small to get bought and I don't want all the attenuating BS. And by the way, the buyers are going away anyways. But I don't want to do this anymore. I really, quite frankly, don't like it anymore. So I want out. I think there is a cadre of 30, 40-year-olds that could be looked at as buyers of firms, but they don't look like traditional purchasers. And the seller needs to become more creative. I think that's the big future we're going to see. And then I think the more entrepreneurial firms are going to bolt together a $2 million firm with a $5 million firm and make a $12 million firm and really, really have a happy, wonderful life for the next 20 years.
So in that picture,
that's the arc I see.
So in that picture that you paint, Bill, what I'm curious is this, in order to get that next level down of talent to stick around, it seems to me like apprenticeship needs to be dialed up a lot more, like an overt. Would you agree? What's your take on that?
Absolutely. And apprenticeship, and you got to let them in the rooms, all the rooms. You're doing that already. They're in all the rooms. They're in the client room. They're also in the compensation room, the client decision room. You got to ask them to be in the room and part of those conversations. But I just think it's time. I think principals, owners, 55-year-old folk like us just have to do that explaining and not asking for a Big Mac and fries, asking why do we need a Big Mac and fries? Why do we want this? And so I'm excited about this next 10 to 15 years of mid-major agency transactions. Nobody's writing the checks anymore. And that's just not the future.
Well, PE is. PE is still writing the checks. And that does change agencies,
And that's a shit life
pretty
for
substantially.
The owner.
It is a shit life for the owner, but tell that to an owner who made $75 million on a PE sale, which our industry now has some that have done that. I don't, as much as I would love to romanticize this idea of, apprenticeship, the first thing I heard was time is literally money in our business. And if you're asking an owner to give that up so that they can train the next, generation of talent, that's really hard to do. And when we look at these best places to work surveys, which, there's a zillion of them you can look at, training, professional development and training lacks across the board in our industry for this very reason. Time is money. What billability are you expecting your talent to meet, especially the junior talent, right? Where's the time? Even Google got rid of 25% time, right? It's really tough to carve that out. It's easy to talk about it, but the business reality facing owners today, especially, generative AI is looming and, everyone's losing sleep over that. I feel like we're coming at this from a much more idealized environment than what people are living.
I can't speak to the realities that other folks are living too. I can only speak to the reality that I'm in. I agree, Aarti, that real apprenticeship and training takes an investment of time. And that's why I underinvested in that for the first full year that we had a couple of new employees. And then I paid the price by having to do too much work myself. It's not about holding an offsite with a day of training where you're not doing client work. It's about bringing your teammates with you into the meeting that you're running. It's about having your teammates work alongside you on that next deliverable. It's about building in an extra half hour of review round time so that you're not doubling the time that it takes. It's maybe 25% more time to bring other people along with you on the work that you are already doing. When I did that, our business actually grew. It wasn't just about apprenticeship for succession planning or being nice to someone. It was not an idealized thing. For me, it was an act of survival because a lot of the work that we do, I lead, and I don't scale as well as I used to in my 30s. I need more people who can do what I do confidently and know how to make those judgment calls. So the apprenticeship and the training, it's not just to bump up a purchase price. It's not just to make good on some social contract I have with my teammates. It's to make sure that all the work doesn't fall to me. And Bill, you asked, what's the future hold for me? The one thing I do see for me, teaching. I'm going to teach till I drop, man. And
that's awesome.
A third of the work we do, I'm getting paid to do that, which means if I can train and apprentice the other folks to do more of the other kind of work, that means maybe I can be an agency owner in my 70s and have a great time doing it while the rest of the business is humming along nicely. But Aarti, if I don't take the time to train an apprentice like that, I can't get there. So
yeah,
I don't think it's overly idealized. I just think it's hard, but it's necessary if you're going to survive.
But Aarti, it's also apples and oranges. I think, and this is a part of the conversation I'm curious to talk to Josh about, is performance lifestyle. Mm-hmm. Okay, you just described the burdens of performance. You just described the burdens of performance and the PE money and the lifestyle and that, or the PE money and that choice that folks are having to make. I'm talking about firms in the, 5 to 13 million range, 5 to 15 million range that are not targets of the PE money. They don't want the PE money. They're not even going to try to sell, and they're still trying to extract value. I think and those are folks that I call lifestyle firms. They've built a lifestyle and it's provided for them and their family in just outside of Denver or just outside of New Orleans, and they're happy as a clam. And they're great, but they would like to extract some value. So I think there's an apple oranges in that sort of 7th and 8th digit of the transaction.
See, I disagree that it's apples and oranges, because what I'm actually describing is some of those lifestyle firms, for the point that I was making earlier that, you have this great portfolio of clients, but your 27-year-old account supervisor is going to start getting a little antsy, and they're going to start seeing what their friends are making at some of their peer agencies, and they're going to start wondering why they're not making that kind of money. And so unless you're growing as an agency, this 27-year-old who you've grown since they were right out of college, and to your point, Josh, is giving you the chance to take that 3-week, teaching assignment, guest lectureship or whatever it might be, that person is going to come to you one day and give you their 2 weeks notice because they got offered $30,000 more down the street. And now this is threatening your lifestyle. I think this is...
How big's the firm you're talking about? So to paint the picture of how big this hypothetical firm, paint the picture.
This hypothetical firm, $2 million. $2 million. The owners are happy as clams. They have a great lifestyle. They're able to show up for all of their kids' school events. They have a 27-year-old. They hired this person right out of college. They've trained them up. Now they can hand off many of the reins to this 27-year-old who's an account supervisor, or maybe a VP. And now this VP is looking at their comp compared to comps at VPs at, the $10, $15 million agencies. They're getting restless. I mean, I have lived this reality in my own agency experience. I've seen it happen
at that size, that boutique size,
at that small, that size. In fact, I would love to have one of the owners on this podcast at some point to talk about how they navigated this and what it was like as we all started growing up. and looking for sort of our next jobs after they had made all of that investment.
I want to hear what Bill has to say, and then I can share my personal experience on the point that you're making, Aarti. But Bill, I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah, well, if it's this $5 million firm that's doing this, so $5 million firm, probably $300,000 per FTE. So what is that? Maybe it's a $10, $12 million firm. So it's just, if it's a $3 million firm, it's kind of a handful of people. Part of me, and when I was running a firm that size, I was like, if you want to leave, leave. We will backfill. This is an attractive place. We're not going to be held over a barrel. We've had that done to us at the big firm, and we're just not going to do it. And so maybe I think it's a little bit of and I too want to hear other owners, but the folks that I'm talking to are like, if this isn't a fit, because this isn't just about your salary package, this is about that whole suite that you get to provide, that you at 27 are doing some pretty heady opportunities. And if this isn't your gig, leave. And if the client wants to leave with you, I've never had that happen to me personally. I'm sure it happens, not in this hypothetical. I've had it happen a little bit older people, where clients sort of move around like that. But I think in this full landscape that we're talking about, let them leave if they want to leave, if this isn't the place for you. And if clients see more value there than they see here, I'm going to try to put up a fight, but there's not a whole heck of a lot I can do about it. And I think Josh did something similar a few minutes ago about that.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of
I want to say
my battles.
One thing to that. The talent is not holding the owners over a barrel. It's not confrontational like that. I mean, they're 27. They are trying to save up. They're looking at their 401k and where it should be. They're thinking about their first down payment. So I don't think they're coming at this as though I don't think they're being greedy. I think they're trying to assess their market value. And when their peers are taking vacations that they can't afford, then they're starting to wonder that, okay, well, what's next for me? And to the point about clients, I once hosted a roundtable with a bunch of clients, and they actually said, our agency owners think that we don't notice when junior people and mid-level people leave, and we notice those the most. And if they can't hold them at that level, the day-to-day, like the grunt work that nobody wants to do, when the quality of that starts to fall, like everything else sort of comes with it. So anyway, Josh, I want to hear your take.
Sure. Look, I can hear truth in both perspectives here. I really can. For the lifestyle agencies, it's a really interesting term. I actually hadn't heard that before, but I am partners with and close contact with a couple of agencies that are more traditional retainer-based, about 30 people, that $5 to $10 million revenue range. Owner isn't particularly interested in selling, but has had a few offers, but is trying to figure out, how do I still make money if I don't work? How do I get some value out of this without having to put in 14 hours a day? And it's a fair question to ask when you're in your 60s. But for the people that are in their 20s and 30s, they have zero interest in coming to work every day just so that the 60-year-old can start working less. There has to be something more to it than that. And so I come back to, what is that motivation besides a paycheck? Is it part ownership? Is it doubling down on apprenticeship? Is it some other flexibility, and we're going to let you do something else in your life that another employer wouldn't let you do? Have a second passion, or be a full-time jazz musician, or travel through Italy, or any of those things. But there has to be an explicit, overt agreement where there's a win-win that's negotiated. For the point on younger people wanting to leave, I when I was at Blanca and Otis, we had on more than one occasion some really smart people figure out that if they went somewhere else, they could make a lot more money. And despite the CEO of Blanca and Otis title, I think everyone knows that is a glorified general manager position, and the decisions on money are being made in London. So CEO may not be the right title for that role. But
shh, don't tell anybody. That's a big secret.
I don't think it's a big secret anymore. But what I would say is, in that conversation, you just have to be honest and say, here's what we can do, here's what we can't do, right? I can go to the mat and see what happens with the money. We can make sure that we're doing more on training. We can give you more flex to do this. We can make sure that I introduce you to the next client CEO. So you form there are things you can do. So your initial question, how do you hang on to the right talent in this market? I don't think the goal is to hang on. I think the goal is to say, here's what we have to offer. Is this a fit? And just to be really honest and transparent about what you can and can't offer and about what you're doing. It's when we're not honest about, well, I would like to work a little bit less. I don't want you to work a little bit harder so I can make money off of your work. That's actually not horrible so long as you're also giving me something else. An honest, overt negotiation, I think, would help a lot.
Yeah, and I don't want to downplay the benefits of some of those things that you talk about. I mean, as we talked about at the beginning of this, or at some point in this call, the value of flexibility, right? And that's a competitive advantage. Our industry has famously lost people, primarily women, when they had children because their needs changed. Hopefully we can make that more parents now so that it's more equitable. But yeah, I mean, so obviously there's huge value in that. But there is also a tipping point where I think talent does start, where your financial compensation does matter quite a bit.
And it should.
And part of that is, part of that is maybe when you are starting a family for various reasons. You look at private school tuition and you're just like, shoot. So yeah, and I know we've been getting, this has been such a great conversation, Josh and Bill, that, I know we've gone well over the time that we normally allot for these conversations. And
let me do one last thing, just because I'd love to get Josh's take on that performance lifestyle thing, and then Aarti, I want your reaction, obviously, as well. So I've got a basic frame, and that we're talking about, and these are $3 to $30 million firms. I mean, that's the universe I'm talking about. So $3 to $30 million firms. And mostly on the smaller end of those numbers, you have what are lifestyle firms. Folks where 1, 2, 5 principal owners are paying themselves somewhere around $500,000 to $250,000 to $500,000 a year. They've got a handful of clients. They've got a handful of employees. They're long-term employees. They're right fit employees, and they are building what I would say, Josh, is what you are building. They are building a firm that provides a lifestyle for the principal, and they're making lifestyle decisions. And I don't mean that in a pejorative or a put down way. I mean that in a very descriptive, enriching way. Contrast that with growth firms that are trying to grow for whatever reason, exit, sale, whatever, but ego that they are trying to grow. They're still paying themselves kind of those same numbers. Maybe the bonuses get a little bit bigger, but the headaches are trebled. The headaches are 3 to 4 times on that journey. And so I'm an advocate for lifestyle firms. I think I see, and that's who I spend a lot of time talking to and locked up value within lifestyle firms. But there's also growth. But those two choices have to be A, intentional, and be honest, because I think that firms that are lifestyle but talk growth are just lying to themselves, and folks that are growth and think they have great lifestyle are lying to themselves as well. Love your reaction.
I think you just caught me on something I've been lying to myself about, so I appreciate that. No, and I mean that genuinely. Well, not lying to myself. I wouldn't go that far, but that I haven't figured out yet. I'll put it that way. Lifestyle. 2 words: life and style. Life is growth or life is decay. Things grow or things die. There is no stasis. And even for the lifestyle firms, Aarti, to the point you were making earlier, if I'm not growing, I am not providing a future for any of my employees who would also like to grow. None of my employees want to hang out and be doing the exact same thing for the exact same salary.
Slow retrograde. It'll just all go away.
Yep. And so my growth goals, and I do have them, are driven by what is going to motivate and provide a growth path for the people who have chosen to work with me. That's what my growth is driven by. And so I do have growth targets. I do have math and numbers and things I want to hit. but it's based on the fact that even a lifestyle firm must grow in order to stay alive. The style part is where the disposable, I can flex my style up or down, right? I can vacation Hawaii, I can staycation at home. That's a lot more forgiving. But if I don't plan for growth, I can't let my people grow.
And one thing I think we're not talking about is we're just talking about growth, because I agree with you, Josh, and Bill and I have had this debate many times, because I do not think you can run a lifestyle business unless there is growth. We're not talking about profitability, right? Like what the difference is that when you are a lifestyle agency, your profitability targets might be different. So you may grow, but guess what? You're going to hire more people so that growth is more distributed and you're not running the sweatshop. If you're running purely on profitability and those numbers, then yeah, you're going to grow, and you may not add the amount of people that you probably should, because you want that number to keep getting bigger, that profitability number. So I think really what it comes down to is profitability versus like what your revenue.
So I would agree with that. I would also say that the pandemic weeded out a lot of agencies that were focused only on profitability. Thank goodness we had no investors or profitability targets. We were allowed to lose money in the pandemic. We were allowed to cut my pay to near zero as an investment in the firm for 6 months, while we didn't cut anyone else's pay. And if I had investors, they would, what the heck are you doing? Like, fire 2 people right now. I had the freedom to make a bet, a very tangible, meaningful bet, and say, you know what? I'm going to forego compensation for 2 quarters to see how this plays out, because I think we're going to come through the other side. If I had been slavish to margin and slavish to profit targets, I would have been forced to do something I didn't believe in. So I'm grateful that my primary growth goal is around providing career path for my people. I had the flexibility of saying, you know what, I will decide what I want that profit margin to be. We invest in the business. We're investing in Gen AI tools. We're investing in infrastructure. We're investing in our people. But I don't have to report profit to anybody else.
Josh, you're not going to love this, but you sound like Richard Edelman right now. That's exactly what he says every chance he gets. And he is a $1 billion agency. Although no, not anymore. I know you guys saw their earnings, right? They're no longer $1 billion anymore. But I feel like this conversation's come full circle. If Josh, the CEO of I'm going to just guess, under $5 million agency, is echoing the same talking points as Richard Edelman.
I have no idea how to respond to that, other than I guess I'm in good company, so that's all good.
Yeah, a blind squirrel finds a nut every now and then.
Well, he also has several people with his last name at his agency as well. So maybe you two have more in common than you think.
Yeah, I hope, again, Chris, if you're listening, that's not the takeaway, and let's get beer soon. So
I know. I think I found my voice as a provocateur in this conversation.
I think you have.
It's awesome. I love it. Mm-hmm. There are great, fully enriched, define enriched however you want to find it, fully enriched agency owners all across the country that have lake houses, that vacation in Europe, that put their kids through state school. They may even put their kids through private school. And they are doing great. The but is there's locked up value that they're struggling to extract.
Agree with that.
Whether it's $2 million or $200 million, whatever the value is, there's locked up value that they're struggling to extract. To bring it full circle, what I'm advocating is go find a 30-year-old, invest in them, and slowly let them buy the firm from you. Yeah. And they feel like an owner, but they don't have the debt. And so Bill, that's a model. That's a great model, actually. Yeah. And I do think we're going to see more and more agencies going that route, especially like you said, with those owners that are 55 plus, and that don't want to go through the whole headache. Or they're just going to throw the keys away and just say, whatever, it served. My kids are in college and I got a Cadillac, so I don't care.
Hey,
but they just toss the keys.
I'm going to leave you with this. There's also option 3. Slowly but surely, 1 week at a time, download your consciousness into an artificial intelligence matrix. Teach it your best one-liners and program your avatar with your best facial expressions.
Exactly.
And then retire while your digital twin makes you money. Just saying. that's also option now 3.
And Josh, we're going to re-listen to this in 2 years, and that's going to be reality. Yeah. And we're going to say, remember when we thought that was science fiction?
Yeah. Very good. Very good. This is awesome. Lord. Josh, thank you. You are a generous, thoughtful, wonderful man, but you are also an amazing leader. And I'm so excited to watch the success of your firm to double beyond the 7 years. I love that.
Much appreciated.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
Yes, yeah. I think Bill, I want to echo everything that Bill's saying. Josh, I mean, I've had the pleasure of knowing you for a very long time. I remember sitting with you outside of H&K's offices. You guys just won the LinkedIn business, I think, or something like that. And you were, to where you are today. And I'm thrilled to have known you for I guess it's been almost 15 years.
I appreciate that very much. It's great to talk to friends like this. And I can't wait to see what happens with your podcast series next. I'll be listening in.
That's awesome. Hey, last question. Which owner, is there an owner you're envious of that we should talk to? Somebody that's doing it, talking about these things that we should go talk to?
Michael Law, Summit Strategy.
Okay. Michael, yes.
Cool. Former CEO of Burson in the U.S., used to run Ogilvy's Asia Pacific practice. Yeah. He and I started our firm the same month. We share office space. And he has grown it into an impressive empire. 35 people, tons of retainer clients. He's doing something right.
Nice contrast.
He's doing something right. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's good stuff. Cool. Well, you're doing stuff. You're doing a lot of stuff right, Josh. Please do not say that with any room for envy. You're doing a lot of things right.
I appreciate it, man.
Well, thank you, Josh. It's such a great conversation with our mutual friends. So, Aarti, I don't know about you, but as we do these podcasts, it's fun to relive some war stories, learn a bunch of things, but also relive some war stories with our friends on the way they're sort of making their decisions, their transition into entrepreneurship. Was there anything that's really stood out from you that you want to highlight from the conversation we just had with Josh?
Well, one of the things that I love about how Josh is approaching Rob Roy is that, he's, as we talked about, right, he's not the PR guy that's talking to the sales team. He's the persuasion guy, right? He looks at everything that we do around the power of persuasion. And I really think that's such an effective way to think about what people, like what our clients actually want from us, right? Like they want persuasion, they want conviction. And to some degree, I think what Josh was saying is truth, right? They want us to figure out what is that truth that's going to resonate with the right audiences. So I think I liked his framing of that quite a bit. I liked his honesty, right? Around the fact that just because you love someone does not necessarily mean that some of the decisions are going to be easy, but he comes at this with such a transparent, like he values transparency so much. And that's really how he leads a lot of these more difficult conversations. And I think that's like you said at the beginning, right? It's just a healthy way to work with people who you care about, whether you're related to them or not.
Yeah. And then the last point is this performance versus lifestyle. And you're right. This is something that we're going to talk about and really sort of unpack and explore. And I think it was sort of the first time he had heard that framing of developing and growing a performance firm versus growing a lifestyle firm. And again, we'll talk about it more, but lifestyle is not a bad thing and performance is not a bad thing. Growth is not a bad thing. And you have to be, even if you're a lifestyle firm, you have to grow. And so I think that, I think he's just really happy with the firm that he has and what he's doing and how he's doing and how he's serving. And I just think it's really, really refreshing as a leader of a certain age that he's making decisions not for any other reason that's A, what's right for his team, and B, what's right for his family. And so it's really kind of exciting the way he's going to market with such clarity.
Yeah, and I think he made such a great point on performance versus lifestyle. If we wanted to kind of put it in that binary, is that there's no stasis, right? Like there's either growth or there's death, and I think that was a really healthy approach. I think how you manage that growth. I think that's really the conversation to be had. It's not growth versus not grow, right? It's like how are you managing that growth? Are you managing it for performance, or are you managing it, to be able to sort of build a sustainable business? But I thought he had a really, again, healthy is a great way to describe the phase of life that Josh is in right now, because I really felt that his approach there was really healthy.
Yeah. And what he's doing with training, I know the training and facilitation, and I think the way you manage that growth, and if you're conscious about a lifestyle firm, the way you manage growth is by just raising profit margin. How do you sort of wring more revenue out of more income out of the revenue that you have? And I think he's doing that. I think he's got some wash, rinse, repeat training, which is fabulous. And I think people are going to find great value in that. And the level of effort for him on session 2, 3, and 4 are far less than what it was on session number 1. So I think that's a great way to grow your lifestyle business and make more money.
Right. Well, also being aware that, you like having enough agility and enough flexibility to know when that model or that formula needs to change, or to be able to customize it to a client who may not sort of fit directly. When a client C may not, fit client B as perfectly as you thought, and being able to be nimble and being able to recognize that quickly and say, you know what, I need to make some changes to our approach here, because that's part of what the client's coming to a Josh Reynolds for, right? As opposed to a big behemoth agency. They're coming to Josh because they want that sort of customizable, kind of high touch service.
Yeah. Well, thanks for listening to the Heart and Science of Creative Leadership podcast, where we're talking to owners of creative agencies about their methods, milestones, and mistakes. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.